All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Thanks for attending tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Josh King. I'm the Assistant Director for Athlete Career Development, and I also work with business finance. So, tonight we're going to look at scholar athlete resumes, and we're just going to talk about articulating the comprehensive athletic experience and how you can utilize that for your resume. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to put those in the chat or just open your mic and we can talk through it. So when we look at, resumes for scholar athletes, we, have a lot of these common characteristics. So these are things you hear all the time. These are things you're told. And obviously they're things that you have accumulated and skills that you've acquired throughout your time being an athlete. So, most athletes are competitive. A lot of people are self-motivated, have leadership skills, time management, and the list goes on. So really what's important too is to understand some of those other abilities. So, accepting constructive feedback. That's one that's really important. That's something that transfers really well, honestly, regardless of your workplace. But especially in certain careers, it's definitely important to be able to take that feedback and apply it and get better. Performing in high pressure environments. Every day you guys are in practice, there's a score. Every event, every lift you go to, you're competing. So, performing under that high pressure is really important. And that's something, again, that translate. And of course, the last skill is just overcoming adversity and learning from failure. That's something that, you guys have to do on a daily basis. Again, it ties in nicely with, accepting that constructive feedback, improving. It's just something that is a part of your everyday. So, couple common myths. These are things that honestly I hear all the time. And usually by this time we spend about 15, 20 minutes looking through it, we can dispel all of these four statements. So, a lot of people think I don't have anything worth putting on my resume. Maybe you've only competed in your sport. You haven't had time to be involved as much on campus, especially if you're a first year student. But that's not really the case. There's definitely things that we can pull from your resume and your current experiences to really build that out. The other thing, again, is I don't have time to do things outside of my sport worth putting on my resume. Definitely not true. There's a lot of things we can do that you can do independently. So it may not be a full blown 12-week internship working 40 hours a week, especially if you're competing during the summer. But there's a lot of things that we can do, again, individually, skill building, networking, different things that we can actually turn into things on your resume. Number three, my athletic experience doesn't really help. That's definitely not true. There's a lot of employers that are specifically looking to hire athletes for the skill sets that we mentioned. And then the most important part is really just articulating that. The other piece is, you may not have the work experience, but you have a lot of those transferable skills from your athletic experience. So as long as you understand how to articulate that, it is definitely a valuable skill. And the last thing is, maybe your only work experience is coaching at summer camps, which doesn't count. It definitely counts. Again, there's communication skills, maybe there's some marketing, logistics. You're teaching students, you're teaching kids how to play your sport. So there's a mentoring and a leadership aspect there. So even if you think it's just a summer camp or just private lessons, whatever the case is, we can definitely find those transferable skills. So next three slides we have here are we're going to take a look at just three, I guess 9 total ways of things that you can transfer over. So I'm not sure why the middle slide popped up first, but these are three things, right? So before we even get started going line by line, we really want to think about how do we write our bullets in general. So, this is not an intro level presentation. At this point, a lot of you guys have already had your base resumes, and we're just looking on expanding this particular section. But if you haven't started, or even if you have, we want to go back to the basics of how to write a good bullet. So when we think about this, we want to think about it in two parts. First off, you want to make sure that you're showing your skills. You're not just summarizing. So I see a lot of times people just put, gain time management skills or improve time management skills. That's great that you gain that skill, but you really want to make sure that you're showing that skill, because with everything we do in the interview and the resume and the cover letter writing process, we want to put ourselves in the shoes of the recruiter. So if you're a recruiter and you have 100 applications and you're looking to interview 10 to 15 candidates and maybe hire one or two, you have to find the things that are going to separate you. So if everyone puts that they have time management skills, that doesn't really help separate people. But if a lot of people put things like that, but then you as an individual actually show that action and provide numbers and proof and examples of how you've done that, it's going to separate you. So even thinking about that just with, your time commitment to your sport. So that again goes to we want two parts to our bullets. So the first part is we want to show our skills and show how we've gained them. And then the second piece, if there's specific examples or proof or examples of that, we want to add those as well. You're going to learn, and you're going to hear this a lot from me, that semicolons are your best friend. Again, in resumes, we want to be short, concise, and just, honestly provide as much information in as few words as possible. So that's how we're going to do that. So when we take a look at this first bullet here, we look at commit 25 plus hours weekly to team activities throughout the year, including practice, weights, travel, competition, and rehab, in addition to a full time course load. So, with this, those are pretty generic things. You might also have film, you might have coaches' meetings. Depending on your sport, you might have position meetings. There might be other responsibilities that you have. But this is a really good way of you don't see the word time management, but you see 25 hours a week. You also see all the things that you're doing. You see that's in addition to a full time course load. Then when you cross reference that with, oh, has a 3.4 GPA, oh, is also involved in, an eating house or a fraternity or, a student organization. You don't have to say it, but people can piece together, oh, if you can do all these things and you're still performing at a high level, then obviously you have the ability to manage your time well. The next part, leadership. This is a fairly vague example, but this is the part where you can put in your own specific pieces. So again, I mentioned semicolons. You're going to see that here. So we look at that first bullet, serve as team leader by setting a positive example on and off the field, semicolon, motivate and mentor younger teammates daily. Again, a pretty generic example, but maybe you're a team captain or maybe you're on a leadership committee within your team. Those are little examples that you can sprinkle in here and combine that. But it just spells it out a little bit and shows how you believe you're a leader. Next bullet. So as athletes, we're all on teams, right? But that doesn't necessarily make you a team player. Surely most of our teammates are good teammates, but sometimes that's not always the case. So how can we show that, right? How can we show that we're good team members? So sometimes there's situations where you have to make a sacrifice for the team. Um, maybe you play one position, but a couple people get hurt, and you have to move over to a brand new position, learn all the plays, learn everything from that angle, and that's a sacrifice that you make to make the team better. So again, that's an example that's used here, talking about committing to the team success, making sacrifices to achieve team goals. Learned and played multiple new positions during the 2017 season when two teammates suffered season-ending injuries. All of these bullets are actually pulled from current students. So these are things that people are putting on their resumes, and that's a great example. The other thing we want to keep in mind is even if we're not using these on our resume, again, we're about to walk through 9 bullets. You're only going to have maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 at most. These are things that we can articulate in a cover letter or, in an interview. So just really keep these things in mind as you're thinking about when you're talking about being an athlete, how do you really show that? And how do you relate it to the professional world? So the next bullet here, again, a lot of people want to show their statistics. They want to show what they've done on the field, and that's great. But if I'm a recruiter, do I really care about that? It depends. Depends how you frame it. So, if you've started in every game the last 4 years, that means you're doing other things right. It means you're preparing well. It means you're performing well. You're being consistent. So maybe that's a skill that I care about. Do I care that you actually started every game? Not particularly. That's not necessarily going to help me that you're a good at whatever your sport is. Um, but when we look at that again, so we talk about daily consistency. So strive for daily consistency to perform at a high level. Scored points in 90% of events competed in during first 2 seasons. So again, we take the skill, we show that we're consistent, or we talk about that, and then we show that through, hey, and 90% of the time, I bring something back to contribute to my team. And that's exactly what we're looking for. Again, that really could be any example. It could be games started. It could be points scored. It could be, there's a lot of different examples that we could use there. Next one is how do we handle, how do you handle and utilize constructive criticism? This is again, really important skill. In my mind, might be equally as important as time management. It's really high up on that list because it transfers to every career. So we talk about listen to coaches and utilize constructive criticism to improve, led to winning the Atlantic 10 Conference Most Improved Runner as a freshman. So again, this could be pretty much any example that shows progress. Some people start on as walk-ons and they earn scholarships. Some people really don't play much and then start every game. Some people improve a percentage, or maybe you have a PR. That's different things you can include there. However, sometimes, especially on bigger sports, you may not get a chance to compete early on in your career, but you're still contributing, right? So maybe you're redshirting your first year, but you're still contributing on the scout team and you're doing things to make your teammates better to win games. So that's something we could talk about as well. So if you don't have the individual stats, talk about what you're doing to contribute to the team and show how they're succeeding. So this is an example from a football scholar athlete. Look at motivate teammates and serve as a vocal leader daily to increase team performances. Led to a 39% increase in team wins from 27 to 2018. So they won 2 games in a year, and the next year they won 6. The next year they won 8. So showing that progress is a great example and using those numbers. Next bullet is, do you help with on-campus recruiting as a student host? So if you don't have as much work experience as others, this is something that translates again really well. Whether you want to go into sales or marketing, or maybe you just want to show your communication and people skills. A lot of you guys are leading tours. You're obviously being host. How can you show success with that? Sometimes maybe you've hosted 4 prospects and 3 of them have committed. That's a 75% commit rate. So that's something that you can definitely share as well. Again, this is a little bit of a generic bullet, perfectly fine as is, but maybe there's more specific things that you do that you want to include as well. By all means, feel free to add those details. But again, this is really good for showing public speaking, communication, just the fact that you're representing the college as well as your program. That's something that can go a long ways if you're looking at some of the sales jobs or anything, with customer service. So the next one, if you're on SAC, are you on a committee? These are 2 pretty longer bullets here. Honestly, if you're on SAC, that's something that you might consider making an entire entry. If you're a senior or a junior and you have a lot on your resume and you're really just trying to trim it down, you definitely want to include this as a bullet point. But these are 2 examples of how you can do that. And the last bullet we have are, again, anytime you can show numbers and show that preparation and what you do for that, it's a great example. So, I said for team sports, this could be for some other sports, just depends, but it's definitely very common in team sports. So when we talk about utilizing film, statistics, analytical data to study opponents prior to competitions, and then in the middle of the games, maybe you practice all week and you're watching film and you expect the team to come out in a certain formation, and 5 minutes in the game, you realize pretty quickly you're going to have to abandon your whole game plan because they're doing something you've never seen before, and you have to make those adjustments. Again, can you react quickly? Can you perform doing that? Can you succeed under those circumstances? So that's the athletic section. Obviously, there's probably some other bullets that could go there, but really the common theme of that is just taking everything you're doing, thinking about it through the recruiter's eyes, and just showing how you can articulate the skills. It's not always the actions, it's not the results, it's more so the skills that you're building from those things. So next we're going to look at fraternities and eating houses. These are very common for a lot of athletes and really just students in general. And a lot of times they're not really articulated as well as they could be. So on the bottom, you see those 4 bullets. Those are the 4 words that I see all the time, but I don't have enough context from a student. So if you're talking about fundraising, how much money was raised? Did you do that individually? Is that part of an organizational effort? Is it from an event? Who did it benefit? Be explicit with that. Especially with a lot of the eating houses on campus, we're not talking about $500 for the semester. We're talking about, 50,000 or 150,000. significant dollars that require a lot of planning for those events, a lot of dedication, and a lot of hard work. So really go into detail and show those things. I see the word social media all the time. Social media is great, but really I don't want to see that word as much as what platforms are you using. Are you talking about Instagram? Are you talking about Twitter? Are you talking about LinkedIn? Tell me the platforms you're using. Are you creating your own content? Or have you increased your viewership and followers? If you're running a student account or something for an organization, I highly recommend writing down the number of followers you have. Maybe if you have the data for interactions, track that and look at it every month and just track that so that at the end of your 9 months or 2 years or however long, you can say increase interactions by X%, increase followership by X%. That's a really good data point to show that you're good at what you do with that. The next part are sponsorships. So, how many businesses do you work with? Maybe you're not raising money, but maybe you're getting a trade for 1,000 meals that's going to save you $6,000, right? That's something that's worthwhile. That's negotiation skills. It's the ability to, sell something. What events are you talking about? And again, how much money did you raise or what did you gain for the organization that's benefiting you or saving you money? And the last part there, again, we've talked about this a lot, but just leadership. Are you leading people, even within the way you frame your bullets, where, have you moved up in position over 2, 3 years? Show that through your formatting. Split up those different positions to show that progression, the time period that you've done each thing, and give the details on how you're doing those things. So we're going to look at 2 bullets here real quickly. How to highlight Eating House. So, if you're not from Davidson, you might not know what an eating house is. It took me about 3 months when I first started here to figure that out. So just keep that in mind because it's not a common term like fraternity or sorority. So the other good thing though is that there's honestly more benefit from this than probably your average sorority. So what we had to do is show that, right? So when you look at this line, you see their titles there. You see the time frame, but in these 2.5 lines, we learn a lot of information. So we see meet weekly with house members to plan house fundraising events to raise money for HIV/AIDS awareness. So in one line, I understand, okay, this is not just a once in a while thing. This isn't purely a social thing. They do community service. They're doing good, raising money. And I know who they're doing it for or what cause they're doing it for. And the second piece, we talk about overseeing led operations for Annual Red and Black Ball, nonprofit organization empowering and supporting those living with HIV, helped raise close to $30,000 for the RAIN in 2019. So again, shows leadership, shows some of the logistical things that they're doing, and talks about how much money they've raised. That shows success. It shows that they're doing a good job with all that. So, and again, in 2.5 lines, you have a lot more information than you did prior. And that's a really good job of compacting that. Second bullet here, not as much, explaining what the organization is through action, but focused on the skills that are applicable to this student's career. So this student wants to work in finance and is interning in finance. So when we talk about, she's an assistant treasurer and publicity committee member, talking about developing a budget and overseeing that and the scope of it being for 180 members, talking about the financial matters and addressing those, talking about just facilitating meetings with banks and eating house committees, just, being on an exec board. So that's a great way to show some of the things that she's done with this organization. Again, that last bullet does a really good job of talking about, she uses Twitter, Instagram. You understand that, she's creating her own content, that it's done not just to show pictures of all the fun parties that you guys are having, but to actually raise awareness used for marketing purposes. So really good job there. On the flip side, we have fraternities, really the same thought process. So I'm not going to read through these as much, but you can see there they use some analytics, some numbers to show the scope of what they're doing. Talk about some of the different charity events. They show who it's for, all those good things. So again, 2 good examples of how do we articulate this and make it worthwhile. So lastly, we're just going to run through, these are sport specific, but these are things that are fairly common within each sport. So, a lot of baseball star athletes are playing in the summer. A lot of times, most often those times are just run by someone who has some extra money and enjoys baseball. And they're actually losing money. It's not something they're doing to get rich. So You might be able to help out with marketing or ticket sales or promotions, social media, event setup. That's stuff that you can add in that section that's actually applicable skills. There's also the opportunity to find a remote internship, or even if you're in a new city, try and find an internship within that area. Once you know where you're playing, that stuff you can work on at an early time. We've had several of our current guys who have done that and been successful with it. So definitely a way to take advantage of that is also. Then we look at some traditional team sports, you know, anything, anything where in the middle of your event you're communicating. Honestly, like this could go extend to track and field if you're on, a relay team or anything like that. But communicating, collaborating with however many teammates are on your team or on the field, the court during your competition, to perform at a high level in a high stress environment. Pretty simple bullet, but just kind of again reiterates those communication skills. When we look at some of the traditional individual sports, there's other skill sets that can be applied. Again, talking about relay events can really use that first bullet. Individual sports, a lot of times you're out there on your own. You might have your teammates cheering you on, but the pressure's on you, right? So you're the one who has to perform. That requires a lot of mental, being strong mentally and just really concentrating and doing all those things. So that's something you can focus on for your bullets. And really that's all we have for tonight. It's a little bit shorter presentation, but again, the main focus just on, showing your skill sets, thinking about things from the side of the recruiter and just applying those skills. Again, this is something where these are very general bullets and can be applied to a lot of people, but that's where I highly recommend meeting with myself one-on-one so we can really take a look at your experiences and really pull out those things that make you unique, again, because we want to create as much separation from you and the next candidate as possible. But on that note, that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions?